ATM and show why you, and speak about why you chose those variations. So you don't have to speak for a long time. It's just that, you know, we picked initiation. We thought it was reflected well in this ATM, or we felt this about this ATM, and someone's going to show it. Do the movement so we can see. Yeah? Okay. Who'd like to start?
I vote for Simon.
I don't. Yeah, we'll have a self-volunteer here. We've got one here.
You said there's no expectation.
Vishali's going to start.
Can only get better.
Don't you like the rationale?
Yeah.
So, gather round where you can see. Yeah. So which element were you choosing? Did you choose for this movement variation?
Location.
Location, okay.
Of feet to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And knees.
Or location could be body part, but you're thinking of the feet. And what ATM?
Bridging.
Bridging. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of to achieve the location of the feet were important in terms of being, you know, to be effortless and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was quite important to make sure.
So the placement of the feet was important
To achieve the...
to make the movement, the lifting of the pelvis easier.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Do you have another element?
I can. I chose initiation to do. Initiation is where you begin the sequence of movement.
Mm-hmm.
And like similar, lifting legs, you can initiate a movement by arching your back,
Mm-hmm.
or you could do it by engaging the abdominals and engaging flexion rather than extension as the primary mover of this movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did do this as an ATM in the end.
Any questions about that? I'll help answer the questions. You don't have to. Okay. So there was both looking for the prime mover, it's how the person was organising themselves through their middle, whether they were using their abdominal muscles or whether they're lifting the legs through arching the back. Yep? Okay. Do you want to do another one?
The pattern of movement.
The width?
The pattern of movements.
Patterns of movement, okay.
And we chose the cat.
The cat
All fours.
on all fours. And what pattern of movement?
Of the spine.
Uh-huh.
The pattern of the spine.
And what pattern?
It concaves and what is the other one? Convex.
Convex. So that's a shape. What pattern?
Mm-hmm.
So the patterns of movements were the global involvement that we could describe. And part of the body could be involved in the pattern, or the whole body, but it's a global pattern, a global action. And you're not seeing the global action, but you're seeing the pattern of action, a part of the global pattern, in the shape of the spine. So when the spine goes concave. What am I doing through my back?
You align the
I've got an arch,
you got an arch and you line all the
vertebra.
vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
And how they, I think the pattern is how you align them
Yes.
and go back to the other side and align them again in a different way.
Yes. So it is, you're right, absolutely right. It is the alignment, then it is the shape, and there are major alignments that we as human beings can do. Here, you're showing one of them in the action of the spine.
Yeah, and your head and your...
Yes. Do you know the name? Anyone else help? Flexion and extension.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
That fits for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's whole body pattern would be this, but it utilizes the same through the spine. In this configuration, you're using a flexing and extending action of the spine. Folding, arching. Arching is extension. Folding is flexion. Yeah? Is it clear? Clearer, yeah. I still see the question mark. It's instead of coloured irises, it says 2 question marks there. Anyone else like to try explaining that in a way that might make sense? Mm-hmm. Oh, so we need you to come over here.
Well, I wondered if pattern of movement was best illustrated by the 4 points activity that we did in the last session, where people were moving homolaterally, contralaterally, and I can't remember what the other one was, but they were all walking movements, but everybody had a different pattern. Does that work?
So that's another way of describing pattern. But here we're skeletal action. Anyone else want to try?
Okay. You've got that one that's bending.
Yeah,
and then,
folding.
And doing this one. Another
Yes.
one that you could do is this one, which is rotating around, twisting around the thing. So that's another pattern.
Mm-hmm.
The twisting is the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this.
I'm wondering whether a pattern of movement has movement being the key, so in terms of flexion and extension, whereas a shape is more fixed. So like concave and convex might be helpful. So a shape is fixed, but a pattern is...
Can have a moving... I think you could have a moving shape.
Moving shape?
Volume of the chest as you breathe in and out. It has a shape, but it changes. But if you take one moment in time...
Yeah. That can't be a pattern.
Yeah, take one moment in time, it's a shape.
Yeah.
Yes. A pattern is a relationship of the parts of the skeleton that does have shape, different shapes in it. But if we look at the skeletal arrangement of the parts, there is some universality to it. And in this movement, on the hands and knees, you are arching your spine or extending and rounding your whole spine. You may not do it that way. It may be a movement just here where nothing else moves. So yes, you can see shape there, absolutely. And yes, it's part of a pattern of movement.
So is the pattern is the movement altogether?
Yes.
It has a beginning and an end, and a sequence
Beginning and an end.
Not
Yeah, that's a timing to it. That's just something. just Emma was going to.
Oh,
Weren't you?
I don't know. Well,
Well,
I was
yeah.
just thinking the one, and another example maybe the one where we actually folded down. So in terms of flexion, like in a folding position, similarly to when we were on our sides. And we, in terms of folding to come up, now I can't do it on that side, sorry. My orientation's out of skew. Where we actually folded to come up. So once again, like using a folding flexion pattern and then opening up into extension. We
just need head mics. Well, the one you can swing from the ceiling. I can see that.
I just think of like a pattern, like even on fabric, you know, you've got a pattern is like the same. Something, there's like a repetition of something. So I just think, well, you know, so when you're side bending, there's a relationship that's similar between those areas, that it does the same, creates the same shape, but it's that pattern, the relationship between.
And it's recognisable in the human form as in the direction of. May have different shapes within it, but it's recognisable in terms of the relationship of the parts. Right?
Is that like, so following on from Amanda?
Can we? Will it come into? No.
Yeah.
Will it come into your group? What you're going to say?
No. It's
Okay. Okay. Inspirations.
So if a person's physiology has a certain pattern that they are often in, like extension or wanting to sort of arch their back all the time, then you could actually enter into different movements, but the tendency will be to enter into the pattern that you are familiar with.
Hold the shape, maybe. Or, yes, the pattern within that pattern.
You said it earlier in that ATM, you said you might be used to arching your back in this movement, but try doing something else.
I think we need to continue. Maybe you could add it with your group, Danielle. Yeah. Okay, so let's have something from another group, and then we can come back and add if you've got more when we've gone around. Yeah? So come around so you can see what's happening over here. Let's join the party over here.
I'll just make my comment because I'll forget that another word that you could use is archetype. That you can see an idea of something that has different manifestations. So a pattern, like an archetype, appears in different movements or shapes, but there's some pattern that we can recognise. So we picked we picked 6 of these, and one that I picked was quality. And words there are that it's flowing or jerky, that it's easy or difficult, or even that it might be a delight. And my part of an ATM of experiencing that quite vividly was when we did the clock, and right at the end we stood and somebody held. So I need a partner, actually. I need someone to hold my head. And when I tried to do this, it had a certain conscious, mechanical character, but when somebody held my head, it just was sinuous, and the quality was very different.
Can you show us the other way again? Take your hands away, Fiona. Oh, thank you. Direction.
And I think this has got something to do with me putting a lot of effort into holding my head. But the impact
and
was
then
in the quality.
Head? Yep.
The quality that I'm experiencing is totally different. My spine just feels like it's free. Yeah, flowing. And
you see the quality she's talking about? Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the elements that we chose under orientation was location, a relationship to the ground. Initially, yesterday I was going to do the one where we'd sort of come up to sitting and we'd swept our hands across the ground and used the ground and the relationship to it to help direct. But when we did the clock this morning with our heads back, and a nose, we had to orientate using our nose to a clock. One of the things I found when I was doing that was the back of my head and the relationship to the ground was making another kind of circle, and I started to get confused with that orientation instead of and that one. So I decided to mention that because it was just interesting to me about the relationship to the ground in terms of I think you were asking for our relationship to be to this clock that was above me, but I felt the ground through my head, and that was sort of directing my orientation in some way.
Yep.
So do you want me to... I don't need to demonstrate, or no? Yep.
Everyone got clear?
Yeah.
Did anyone like to see it? What she's talking about? Can you show the difference? It made so that when you weren't thinking of the ground.
So you'd asked us to. Oh, if I put my legs down so they can see, using our nose.
Sorry. Actually, does need. Of course, it needs to be that side. Thank you. Sorry, Jenny. Slow.
Was it 12? And then going around, but sorry, I'm going anti-clockwise there. Even now I'm confused. But
right, can you do the clock with your nose, Fiona? Make as if you're turning the hands of clock.
Not really.
Just,
well, I thought I was.
Yeah, because you can see what I'm seeing if people can see the difference, because there is a. So she's orientating her nose. Okay, now change to the back of your head.
No, so I started... Because even when I was doing that, I started to feel this.
The back of your head, anyway.
And I thought, this is making a circle. What circle is that making? And is it the right kind of circle for that to be? So the relationship to the ground, I was confusing it, I guess.
No, not at all. It's a really important aspect of the feedback of where and how we're sensing. And all the time we're getting information feedback from the environment, from inside of us, and from the ground in particular, but also what we're orienting to in the environment. So when you can orient with your nose, or you could orient with the back of your head to the ground. And then there's the clock that you could orient. Wherever you put that clock can make a difference to something about the movement.
Is that called a reference point then?
We use it to sense ourselves. We use those things to sense ourselves. But whether it's a reference point or not would depend on the context that we use. So when you roll the head in the beginning, so if you notice the place where your head's resting on, and you roll your head, and then you do the last, you come back and you notice where your head's resting, that could be described as a reference point. You come back to refer to see if it's different. But we refer to the environment to give us feedback of what we're doing. So we might sense the ground, but do we sense that we're moving, if we're rolling our head, that our head's moving a distance on the ground? And we sense that in different ways. We can refer to the sensation between our head and the floor and what sensory information that gives us. That might be what we use to tell us how far we've travelled, or it may be our nose that we use in its pathway through space or a relationship to somewhere else. So you could also maybe describe them as, where am I referencing as I'm moving myself, but it's constantly changing. Great. Another one from this group?
So under the timing, so I chose the speed one, so that's fairly obvious one, but it's a rate or pace of movement and momentum. So this is the one I chose. And I'll probably do it in different ways, and just to show the difference.
Great.
On purpose, I'm going to adjust the movement so you can see what the difference is. And I can't exactly remember it, but the pace, so I could just go like this, and I have a vague memory of it, and what I've done is I've just let it go. So I haven't allowed for for me, I needed a slower pace to start with. So it's just that beginning movement, and then just building on that. So if I went any further now without doing all the other previous things, I'd probably fall straight over or not looking at other aspects of myself. So, and then I'd probably look at, because we have the head tilting back, so bringing that element in it, and it is sort of like that real, and I can feel that going there. And there is that, like even with that movement now, I'm moving my head back too fast, and I'm going to tip over. So that's where the speed and the timing and bringing it all in together in that same sequence. So
great.
Right pace.
Thank you.
So by saying Leonie, speed, so we also picked the speed, and I just want to some elements.
And with this movement?
Yeah, I can add with this, or I can show you different elements which we talked about.
Great.
In terms of speed.
You can do it with whichever movement you'd like, you did it with.
So like you talked about fast and slow, but we added about the pauses in between in that speed. And we also talked about the consistency of speed all the time.
So would you like to show us? Yeah.
Yep, and variability. So the rolling of head, so we're doing the rolling of the head, in which, so I can just, so there are different speeds. We can just do fast, or we can just do really slow, and then in relationship to the person who can. So if I do really fast, can she? Can follow that speed with me, or if I do really slow, can she? So all those relationships. And the variability, like if I do right, if I go to right and with a slow speed, whereas when I come back, can I do same speed, like use the same speed to come back, or if I go to left, if I do like fast here, whereas I was slow on to that side, so little differentiations between the speed, what else, and the pauses. So if, so we go to the right, and then pause, and come back. So,
Thank you.
And I think one of the reasons why we chose that one as well was because we felt that was one ATM where almost everyone had to go slow initially to get the quality of the movement before speeding up. So that's sort of why we chose that one.
Great. Want to do another one?
Were you in that group as well, Barbara? Did you have one more that you wanted to do? I just didn't know whether you wanted to. Sorry, I didn't want to cut in as well.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, I think it was me who chose. Kinesphere interior. And it was pointed out that a sphere is a circular shape, but when it's interior, it doesn't have to be. And we defined it as the movement inside the body of bones, muscles, organs, etc., or this space or volume inside the body. So an example would be the...
Show us.
Sorry?
Show us.
Yeah, sure. So the ATM that we chose was the breathing one that we did yesterday.
Let's guess. That's great. Yeah? You want to see from where you are? Thank you. Did you want to say anything more, Barbara? It's very clear.
Just that it was fascinating to me because I'd never thought of the volume of the inside of myself and depth and things like that. So it was a very useful concept.
Great. Okay, so we've been here.
Silvana, did you want to talk to the one that I demonstrate? Okay. So one of the other ones we chose under timing was sequence, and we described it as the order of movements and how you coordinate the movements, and also the relative timing of the order of the movements, so in relation to each other, and the relative movement of body parts in relation to other body parts and in relation to the ground, environment and orientation. So we found that with sequence actually it related to a lot of the other ones. Mm-hmm. And the one that we chose was just rolling up from your back up to sitting. So did you want to describe? No?
We just want to show, not describe.
I'll show it.
And your particular, what you're particularly looking for, because you had many connections.
Connections,
yeah.
yeah.
So in that movement, which aspect of the sequencing were you thinking of?
We
Anyone
mainly focused on the order of the movement. So it started with the arms moving, then head, then leg, and rolling up.
Very clear.
Yeah.
Okay. You got another one? Or you?
So under orientation, we explored directions. So there's obviously lots of different directions: up, down, right, left.
Okay, show us what you.
Yeah. So
how you applied it, or which ATM variation.
So we explored it in a couple.
Just one, it'll do.
Oh,
just because we've got a lot.
Yeah, a simple one
would
be in the, I don't remember the name of the ATM, but the direction of the arm when we were asked to lift our arm and reach out. So, yep. So the direction could have been.
You've got direction of parts.
Direction of parts.
Got it could be the hand, whichever part you're naming. Yeah, thank you. So maybe we'll try and guess what you're showing now. So without speaking, could you do the variation from the ATM?
Do you want us to tell you what element it is first, or not?
I see. It could get tricky. Yep, element.
Yeah. Okay. Let me pull out my notes.
We're not talking about it.
Oh, right, okay. So we're just
Just
showing
showing.
what it is. Okay. So I'll say what it is then, yeah? So we'll do trajectory. Yep.
Trajectory. Mm-hmm. And why did you choose that one?
So in terms of that one actually still came from me from the other day when Danielle mentioned it about Simon's movement, and it stuck with me since then in terms of the path that those arms took through space, like the form and the shape that his arms took is what, like, that's just stuck with me in terms of how I remember trajectory now. So I just thought it was a nice one to show a clear path through space of the arms in particular in that movement.
Thank you. Another one?
Which other one? Okay. Do you want to demonstrate? I don't want to demonstrate.
This is actually one that we didn't want to do because we found hard to define yesterday until today.
Yeah, so this is flow. Which one did we?
The one we did this morning.
Yep.
Yeah? Great.
You did it and I didn't.
And another one? Is it just the two of you, or is there Martina? Yeah. Martina.
You did configuration. Yeah, so we're going to do configuration.
Mm-hmm.
Our configuration we thought was important in the side moving of the legs and placing your arm in the correct position to stand up. Because if you put the legs too close together, you wouldn't be able to do that. And if the arm is not in the right configuration to your body and to your legs, then you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right, makes sense. Okay, another group?
So, do you... We actually did variations of...
Do you mind coming onto either this mat or this mat? Just it's easier for Jenny.
We actually chose the same movement for each of our ones, but just slightly different variations of that same movement.
Yep.
Do you want me to do my one first?
Just show us, let us have us.
So I watched Priscilla do this. We called it side twisting from hips. Not sure if that's the... And I looked at self-organisation.
Yeah.
Patterns of movement. So I noticed the hips rotating.
Mm-hmm.
The spine twisting.
So when you talk about the hips rotating, pelvis?
Some opening or extending of the spine.
Mm-hmm.
And some folding and flexion also on the other side, that side.
Yep.
Yep.
So that was patterns. Did you say it was patterns?
Patterns of movement.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So Christina's going to take a very similar position, but just with one aspect changed. Anybody spot what it is? It's Friday afternoon, so if you haven't, so the difference being the feet, rather than being feet standing, so the feet are now sort of soul to soul.
Uh-huh.
In essence, so I chose timing, and one aspect of that was the physical and the emotional. So flow being physical aspect and emotional aspect. The physical aspect being that there's there was a smooth. Yep, there's a smooth motion from one side to the other with a slight pause. Pause in the middle there. One aspect of the emotional flow was that between us, we all thought that in comparison to doing this in an ATM, it was a little bit of a Friday afternoon exercise after lunch, so the attentiveness wasn't quite the same, which does make a whole interior sort of quality difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like an exercise
Mm-hmm.
repetition rather than.
Can you do it? Can you do it that way for us, Christine? What they just described: post-lunch exercise, less attention. Uh-huh. Was there something else I missed about that? Your description of that?
This one's a tricky one because a lot of it is your internal feeling, and then another observer is projecting something.
Mm-hmm.
As this is my pure projection, is that Christine's interest in it is not as I've seen her when it's being in an ATM.
Mm-hmm. And did you have a conversation about that?
Along that ilk, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we did, yes.
And
we supported that ilk.
Uh-huh. Christine too?
Yeah, he asked me if I could do it forever, and I said yes, but I'd probably like to change things about it because I get bored.
Uh-huh.
So the curiosity would drop off.
Great. Thank you. And
do it with the legs the same. How we did it, yeah. Do it, yeah. Thanks. So my first category was in orientation and the trajectory, so the path through space. So we decided that the hips were taking a tilt, an arc, sort of movement in space. Sort of, I guess if you can imagine within them, there is a bit of a semicircular arc. That the legs were also tilting.
Can I just check when you say hips?
Yeah, sorry, I just said pelvis.
Okay, but you did a certain shape in space.
Yep.
And I didn't know what that shape was. That shape defining your words, or was it mimicking the shape of the arc of his pelvis?
I think what I'm thinking is the way I did it, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
The way thinking about the movement of what I needed to do to get it sort of moving, the trajectory of it. I imagine that within that there's sort of that movement to sort of get it to tilt.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the other one was location, so relationship to the ground. So I guess again the similarities between the two, between trajectory and location, is that it is tilting, that the pelvis is tilting in relation to the ground. The shoulders were tilting at the time as well, whether that's not really happening as much now. It's more the heads that are in moving in relationship to the ground, the location of the head.
That makes sense. Does that make sense to you? That while the pelvis is moving in a particular trajectory through space, it's also changing its location on the ground. Great. Thank you. Ginny, Simon?
We're in the 3 points.
Okay, want to meet in the centre?
So we had initiation.
Oh, we can do that one.
Yeah. No, just do it. Just do it. So Simon initiates the rolling of his head from his pelvis.
Mm-hmm. You see that? Everybody else? Yeah?
So it could be I'm rolling my head, but it actually, if it's a study in initiation, then it would probably be truer to say I'm tilting my pelvis on the horizontal plane, and the consequence is my head rolls.
Uh-huh.
So we talked a lot about
horizontal plane being the plane of the floor.
Because my hips are, because the tilt is this way.
Yes.
It's not this way.
Yep.
So
great.
We talked amongst ourselves. We talked a lot about initiation and where it begins, and it seemed to us that there's two elements. You can look at what appears to be the source of a movement, and see what's moving. But then there's probably a more specific and fundamental aspect of initiation, which is which muscles are actually beginning a movement, which then could act on a certain body part that makes it look like that part is moving first. Yeah. So with that, what I just did, it's my pelvis that's moving, but what's moving my pelvis? And even I'm not entirely sure about that.
Would that go into pattern then?
Well, it could go into pattern. Yeah, it could link to pattern. And this is what you're discovering. There's so many things interweave with one another, but you're developing a language that's more common and that you can actually distinguish what it is you're talking about. And you'll have the language to ask questions to find out what it is that somebody else is talking about doing it.
So for a casual observer, I imagine observing someone doing what I was just doing, you go, okay, well, the initiation is probably shoulders or neck or somewhere like that, but there's a whole other thing going on there. So again, it was useful for us in discussing it to go, okay, well, we've got to be really careful about our assessments about where things are initiated, and like all things, it seems in Feldenkrais, don't just assume because you're seeing something that that's actually what's happening.
Yes, and that it can be very different organisation to think about if my action to reach is like this, I'm initiating with my hand, but the power to initiate could come from my abdominal muscles, it could from my back extensors, any number of different places. What you may have noticed is that when you change your intention to initiate, even if it's the same muscular group that's creating that configuration or movement in that direction, there can be similarities in where the movement, what musculature primes the action.
Another one that we chose looked like this.
Anyone got a guess? It was spatial orientation, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
I just
so
heard two things and didn't know which the yes was.
Spatial orientation. So we had this idea of orientating different parts to within yourself. So Margaret demonstrated, the pelvis relative to the head, for example, as well as then in 3 different spatial orientations with respect to gravity. And to the room, essentially. Yeah.
Great.
It's like Feldenkrais charades.
Yeah.
It's actually, the less speaking, the more fun.
Do you notice how good you were getting at charades?
What one are you going to show me now? Don't tell me.
Yeah. Any guesses? I heard a wisp. I heard some whispers.
Trajectory, flow, or quality.
Trajectories or quality. Flow.
We chose sequence.
Sequence.
Yeah. Just the succession of the movements.
Yeah.
Can I ask, why did you think it was sequence?
Because definitely, Marisa, like we described, the order of movement, the coordination of the sequence or the movements of the body parts within itself or in relation to each other. So I could see straight away sequence.
They were primed. They were primed for sequence. But I think that it's totally apt that we could see the other things. And do you find it interesting that different movements... Did you find in your discussion that different movements showed up different things more easily in some variations? Like sequence. In a larger movement, it's easier to track.
Yeah.
It's easier to track.
Trajectory, if you're looking at things that go into the hemisphere, sort of,
Mm-hmm.
or the movement of Jonathan's head.
Yes.
That's stuck. That's what that means to me now, apart from the elbow and the hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so yeah.
Great. Well done. So you really truly are beginning to observe movement, know what you're looking at, and you'll be able, it'll serve you well as you do your activities between segments. And in terms of when you're in an ATM and maybe you think, oh, you just want to be in the pleasure, great, or you're getting a little stuck or you want to find something different. Orient your attention. Could I change the speed? Could I change the sequence? Could I change the location of some part of myself? Would that make a difference? What direction am I going in? I mean, particularly in this movement that the lesson we were exploring just before lunch, where you think right of your left leg is lying on your stomach, it's going to influence the ability of the movement to pull through your skeletal chain. Keep it closer to you, it's a tighter twist, and you're more likely to fall. The more you reach and allow the twist through all yourself, the more the distribution of movement occurs through the parts. So it's a resource tool. Sometimes you might just want to forget about it, but it's really, you'll develop more and more your skills in seeing and sensing these things. Okay, Jenny, you got announcements?
So, because our brains are a little fuzzy at this end and some people aren't here, I will send you all an email very soon setting out kind of what happens next. But essentially, next time we're together will be October, and it will be this group in Melbourne. Sydney will have their segment a couple of weeks earlier, so if the dates are a challenge for anyone, you have those options. People who need to make up extra time, which is basically people who started in March or this segment, there will be 3 days extra following on after both the Sydney and the Melbourne segments. So we'll have a day off to draw breath, and then the following 3 days will be catch-up days. If any of the rest of you would like some extra revision for a very minimal fee, you would be welcome to come and hang out with that group. But I will send you the details of that. Also, within the next week or two, there will be the new learning activities to support your explorations between now and October, and we'll let you know as soon as those are up in the knowledge base. Most of you now have managed to log in and find that, so I'll remind you of the links and so forth. Sometimes it does seem that funny things happen there and passwords all of a sudden stop working, so if that happens to you, just let me know, and ideally tell me what password you would like and I'll reset it for you. I also hope very soon to have set up the discussion forums for each of your learning groups. There's been some technical hitches with that, but I think it's now just down to me to figure it out and do it. So again, once that's ready, we'll tell you how to get online to join those online discussions. I know some of you managed to set up email loops, which were great for sort of hearing what some of you have been up to. No, it's an online chat group thing. Yes, yeah. So you go and type your message in, and everyone in your learning group, yep. And then you can read what other people have done. And in the past, it's been possible that you could set an alert to your email that when something came in, you got a message in your email saying, go and look. I'm not sure if that's possible with the current setup, but if it is, I'll let you know. Apart from that, it's probably just a case of saying thank you very much to Stephanie and to Ruth and Lisa, who've helped guide us through these couple of weeks. This whole training is slightly experimental in terms of timing and dividing the groups and so forth. I think we've all done actually remarkably well to cope with extended weeks, but it's all part of a learning curve, so we will continue to evaluate how that works. So thank you all, and thank you. The January dates are still as they always have been, and they will be 3 Monday to Friday blocks with weekends off. Okay.
And just while we're on the thank yous, because I'm not great for thank yous at the end, so it's nice that you can stay in your process. We believe you're appreciative of learning. Certainly you've shown that you're interested and engaged and moving along in the process, and it's a real honour and privilege for us, the teaching team, to be a part of your learning process and to learn with you. And so I thank you guys, really, and Ruth and Lisa and Jenny, especially Jenny, for all her multitasking in all her roles. Superwoman, thank you for supporting us all.
Thank you.
signed the chooks yet, make sure you do.
Ruth, do you want to say something? Okay. Okay. So we're going to finish off with an ATM. If you need a bathroom break, please. But just, it's just water out.